February 7, 1941. In the desolate expanse of the Libyan desert, a final, desperate gambit unfolds. 112 tanks, a force once deemed formidable, lie shattered or captured. Nearly 25,000 men, the remnants of a proud army, are trapped, their escape routes severed. This is not just a defeat, it is an annihilation. It is the end of an army, and the culmination of a campaign that began with grand Italian ambitions. But how did such a force, numerically superior, equipped for conquest, find itself facing such utter destruction? The answer lies not just in the final battle, but in the leadership and decisions that paved the way for this desert catastrophe. The year is 1940. Italy, under Benito Mussolini, enters the Second World War, eager to expand its empire. In the vast North African theater, the stage is set for an invasion of British-held Egypt from the Italian colony of Libya. Leading this charge is Lieutenant General Mario Berti, a seasoned officer born on February 3, 1881, in La Spezia, Liguria, Italy. Berti is a veteran of the First World War, where he achieved the rank of colonel at a remarkably young age, distinguishing himself on the Trento front and at the Battle of Asiago. His service earned him the Italian Silver Medal of Military Valor and even the British Distinguished Service Order. Later, as a general, he commanded the Corpo Truppe Volontarie in the Spanish Civil War, notably during the Aragon Offensive, where his forces played a significant role. Berti is known for his operational realism, often highlighting logistical constraints to Mussolini, a stance that sometimes put him at odds with the fascist regime's demands for rapid conquest. In the summer of 1940, General Berti assumes command of the Italian 10th Army in Libya, replacing General Francesco Guidi. This army, positioned in Cyrenaica, is tasked with the invasion of Egypt. On paper, it is a formidable force, comprising 10 divisions after transfers from the 5th Army, totaling around 250,000 men. Yet, General Berti understands the underlying weaknesses: inadequate mechanization, limited mobility, and reliance on foot mobile infantry. His personal history marks him as a capable, if cautious, commander, a pragmatist facing an ideologue's dreams of empire. On September 13, 1940, General Berti leads the Italian 10th Army into Egypt, initiating Operazione E. The advance is slow, covering approximately 100 kilometers into enemy territory. After 3 days, the advance halts at Sidi Barrani, a small coastal village, due to significant logistical problems. General Berti deploys his forward units in a series of fortified strongpoints, but these positions are not mutually supporting, with large gaps between them covered only by motorized patrols. This strategic decision, born of logistical necessity and perhaps underestimation of the enemy, will have catastrophic long-term consequences. The forces arrayed against General Berti and the Italian 10th Army are not just the British Commonwealth troops, but also the inherent, debilitating weaknesses within the Italian military itself. General Berti, a man who had earned respect on previous battlefields, now grapples with a system ill-equipped for modern desert warfare. The Italian army, structured for mountainous terrain, struggles in the vast, open desert of North Africa. One of the most significant obstacles is the sheer lack of mobility. While the British forces are largely mechanized, the Italian 10th Army under General Berti is predominantly foot mobile infantry. Transport is scarce, and the vehicles they do possess are often outdated. The armored component is woefully inadequate. Many of the tanks are obsolete Fiat L3 tankettes, capable only of mounting machine guns, utterly outmatched by British Matilda tanks with their 40mm guns and 80mm armor. Even the newer M1139's medium tanks are limited in number and capability. Logistical problems plague every aspect of the Italian advance. The initial push into Egypt grinds to a halt after just 95 kilometers because supply lines become dangerously overextended. General Berti's army needs to extend metalled roads and water pipelines just to sustain its frontline units, a monumental task in the unforgiving desert. Fuel, water, and ammunition are constant concerns, limiting operational reach and tactical flexibility. Moreover, the defensive strategy employed by General Berti at Sidi Barrani creates a fatal vulnerability. The fortified camps, though seemingly strong individually, are spaced too far apart. They are not designed to provide mutual fire support or to allow for rapid reinforcement. This rigidity contrasts sharply with the British doctrine of mobile warfare, a lesson the Italian High Command, despite warnings from Generals Lick E. Berti, has yet to fully grasp. Mussolini's demands for rapid conquests often override operational realities, creating immense pressure on commanders like General Berti to achieve ambitious goals with insufficient resources. The institutional resistance to modernizing the army, a struggle General Berti and other generals often faced, proves catastrophic. Senior Italian generals had warned against idolizing the tank at the expense of infantry and mules. Even after the war began, Marshal Badoglio, chief of the Italian Supreme General Staff until December 1940, reportedly quipped about German mechanized methods, stating, "We'll study it when the war is over." This mindset leaves the Italian 10th Army, and thus General Berti, with a force ill-prepared for the mechanized onslaught that awaits them. General Berti, facing these immense challenges, ultimately falls ill and is relieved of his command on December 23, 1940. He is replaced by General Giuseppe Tolera. The foundations of the disaster, however, have already been laid. The army General Berti commanded for months, with its inherent weaknesses and the strategic dispositions he was forced to adopt, is now left to face the full fury of the British counter-offensive, Operation Compass. No one believed the British, outnumbered and seemingly outgunned, could achieve such a decisive victory. They were about to be proven catastrophically wrong. December 9, 1940. The desert stillness shatters as British General Richard O'Connor launches Operation Compass, a counter-offensive initially planned as a 5-day raid to push the Italians back from Egypt. The British Western Desert Force, comprising the 7th Armored Division and the 4th Indian Division, numbering around 36,000 men, strikes with devastating speed and precision. They exploit the wide gaps between the fortified Italian strongpoints that General Berti had established at Sidi Barrani. Within just 3 days, the British overrun the Italian defences, capturing or destroying almost all the Italian defenders. On December 11, Sidi Barrani falls. By December 16, the Italians are completely ejected from Egypt. General Berti, who had been on sick leave when the operation began on December 9, returns to North Africa on December 14, only to witness the rapid collapse of the positions he had overseen. The strategic vulnerabilities he had recognized, but perhaps could not overcome, are now brutally exposed. The British advance continues relentlessly into Libya. On January 3, 1941, the 6th Australian Division, which has replaced the 4th Indian Division, attacks Bardia, a heavily fortified port 30 kilometers inside Libya. The Australians, with limited casualties, break through the Italian fortress, capturing 40,000 Italian defenders. The disaster for the Italian 10th Army deepens. January 22, 1941. The port of Tobruk, another critical Italian stronghold, falls to the British. Another 27,000 Italian prisoners are taken. The Italian 10th Army, now under the command of General Giuseppe Tolera, is in full retreat, its remnants scrambling westward along the Via Balbia, the coastal highway. General Berti, now sidelined, can only observe the unfolding catastrophe, a direct consequence of the material deficiencies and strategic misjudgments that plagued the initial invasion he led. By early February 1941, the British have captured approximately 130,000 Italian prisoners, 420 tanks, and 1,300 guns. The remaining Italian forces, including the Sabratha Division and motorized infantry, are desperately trying to escape encirclement. General Tolera orders a hasty evacuation of Benghazi around February 3, 1941. The British 7th Armoured Division, under Major General Sir Michael Amor Krieg, embarks on a daring desert dash. They undertake a grueling 170-mile march through the desert, aiming to cut off the retreating Italian column. This audacious maneuver, bypassing the coastal road, is designed to intercept the Italians at Beta Fam, a small coastal settlement between Benghazi and Ajdabiya. On February 5, 1941, the leading elements of the British Combe Force, an improvised mobile column of about 2,000 men from the 11th Hussars, 2nd Royal Tank Regiment, and 2nd Battalion, Rifle Brigade, arrive at the Via Balbia south of Benghazi. They establish blocking positions near Sidi Saleh, approximately 48 kilometers southwest of Antalat and 32 kilometers north of Ajdabiya. 30 minutes later, the first Italian convoys, unaware of the trap, drive into a British minefield and are ambushed. The Italian column, stretching for miles, grinds to a halt. British artillery, anti-tank guns, and armored cars unleash a torrent of fire, throwing the Italian forces into utter confusion. General Annibale Bergonzoli, commanding the Italian 22nd Corps, nicknamed Electric Beard by his men, is now the senior officer on the ground, tasked with breaking through the British roadblock. February 6, 1941, 8:45 a.m. General Bergonzoli rallies his forces, including elements of the 10th Italian Bersaglieri and M13 40ths medium tanks from the Babini Armored Group. He orders a series of coordinated assaults to break through the British lines at Beta Fam. The attacks are desperate, but poorly coordinated. The Italian M13 40ths tanks, though superior to the earlier models, are committed piecemeal against well-positioned British anti-tank guns and cruiser tanks. Across the desert, the British forces are in a state of controlled chaos, exhilarated by their rapid advance but constantly pushing the limits of their logistics. Lieutenant Colonel John Coombe, commander of Combe Force, receives reports of massive Italian columns approaching his hastily established blocking positions. His men, exhausted from the 170-mile desert dash, are digging in with what little time they have. Orders crackle over the radio: hold at all costs. They know they are a small force, barely 3,000 men with 86 tanks, blocking the retreat of tens of thousands of Italians with hundreds of vehicles and artillery pieces. There is an initial uncertainty about the exact size and composition of the Italian force, but the sheer scale of the enemy column soon becomes apparent. British commanders, peering through binoculars, see a seemingly endless stream of trucks, tanks, and infantry. They correctly deduce that this is the main body of the Italian 10th Army, but they are still surprised by the sheer number of vehicles and men attempting to break through. Their primary concern is holding the line until the rest of the 7th Armored Division and the 6th Australian Division can close in from other directions. They believe the Italians are attempting a coordinated breakout, underestimating the internal disorganization and despair gripping the retreating forces. The Italian attacks on February 6 are fierce but lack cohesion. At 10:45 a.m., the 10th Italian Bersaglieri, supported by L3 light tanks, charge the roadblock defended by the 11th Hussars and the 2nd Battalion of the Rifle Brigade. The British hold firm, their anti-tank guns inflicting heavy casualties. Thousands of Italian soldiers begin to surrender, a disheartening sight for those still fighting. The remainder of the 4th Armored Brigade, including the 7th and 3rd Hussars, arrives and strikes the Italians on their left flank, just north of Beta Fam. The night of February 6 brings a temporary lull, but the tension is palpable. General Berti, though far from the immediate battlefield, had often observed the disparity in equipment and training. The consequences of that disparity are now playing out in stark reality. If you had been General Bergonzoli, with your army trapped and facing annihilation, knowing the systemic weaknesses you carried into battle, what would your next order be? Tell me in the comments. February 7, 1941. The final, desperate acts of the Battle of Beta Fam unfold. General Tolera, showing immense personal courage, rides into battle in an M13 40ths tank, personally leading a last desperate attack against British forces. His actions are a testament to the bravery of individual Italian soldiers and commanders, even in the face of overwhelming odds and systematic failures. But individual heroism cannot compensate for the strategic and material deficiencies that General Berti and his predecessors had warned about, and which had gone largely unaddressed. The Italian attempts to break out continue throughout the morning. At 8 o'clock, General Bergonzoli orders another assault. M13 40th tanks, disregarding heavy losses, charged towards the positions of the 2nd Battalion of the Rifle Brigade. 5 tanks managed to smash through the British line, almost overrunning the British headquarters. But a single, well-placed 2-pounder anti-tank gun stops all 5 tanks, effectively sealing the fate of that particular thrust. The British reinforcements continue to arrive. The 6th Australian Division is pressing down the coastal road from Benghazi, tightening the noose. The Beta Fam area becomes a scene of utter devastation. A 24-kilometer line of destroyed and abandoned Italian lorries, approximately 100 guns, and 100 knocked out or captured tanks litter the desert landscape. The Italian 10th Army, once commanded by General Berti, is no longer a coherent fighting force. It is a shattered remnant, caught between the British hammer and the unforgiving desert. The sheer scale of the British victory is almost unbelievable. The Western Desert Force, never exceeding 30,000 troops in battle, has advanced 800 kilometers in 10 weeks. What does it tell you about a man that he made that choice with everything to lose, knowing the battle was already lost? Tell me in the comments. General Tolera is found gravely injured in one of the disabled M13 40th tanks, a testament to his frontline leadership. He dies of his wounds the following day. General Bergonzoli is captured. At 11 a.m. on February 7, 1941, General Virginio, Chief of Staff of the Italian 10th Army, arrives at the 4th Armored Brigade headquarters to formally surrender. The battle is over. General O'Connor transmits a terse, triumphant message to General Wavell. Fox killed in the open. The Battle of Beta Fam marks the effective destruction of the Italian 10th Army. The British take over 25,000 prisoners at Beta Fam alone, along with 107 tanks and 93 guns. The total for Operation Compass is staggering: 133,298 Italian and Libyan prisoners, 420 tanks, and 845 guns. British casualties for the entire campaign are remarkably low, with approximately 500 killed, 1,373 wounded, and 55 missing. The campaign, which began with General Berti's cautious but ultimately flawed invasion of Egypt, has concluded with an almost unprecedented level of defeat for the Italian forces. The issues of poor equipment, inadequate logistics, and rigid command structures that General Berti had to contend with during his command proved insurmountable for the entire army. Which side of this story do you think history got wrong in its initial assessment, and why? Tell me in the comments. The desert wind whips across the Via Balbia, carrying the metallic tang of burnt fuel and the acrid scent of despair. It is the morning of February 7, 1941, the last desperate hours of the Italian 10th Army. General Giuseppe Tolera, commander of this doomed force, stands before his remaining officers. The reports are grim. British armored vehicles, like desert predators, have cut every escape route. To the west, the main body of the 7th Armored Division presses relentlessly. To the east, the 6th Australian Division closes in. The coastal road, the only artery of retreat, is blocked by Combe Force. General Tolera, a man of quiet determination, makes a final, agonizing decision. He will lead from the front, a desperate, personal attempt to inspire a breakthrough. He climbs into an M13 40th medium tank, its armor a thin shell against the inevitable. Around him, the last functional Italian tanks, perhaps a few dozen, prepare for one final thrust. Their crews, weary, hungry, and demoralized, steel themselves for the impossible. The order is given. The engines roar to life, a cacophony against the vast silence of the desert. The tanks lurch forward, a spearhead aimed directly at the British positions at Russ Ben Hagen, a series of small hills that include the Pimple and the Mosque, critical observation points along the Via Balbia. Behind them, thousands of Italian infantry, some still clutching their rifles, others simply hoping for escape, watch with bated breath. The British anti-tank gunners of the 2nd Battalion, Rifle Brigade, hold their breath, their eyes fixed on the approaching Italian armor. The desert shimmers in the early light. Rangefinders click, sights adjust. The first M1340s tanks close the distance, their machine guns spitting fire. British 2-pounder anti-tank guns open up, their shells slamming into the Italian tanks with sickening thuds. General Tolera's tank pushes forward, a symbol of defiance. It traverses the broken ground, aiming for the heart of the British line. Rounds ricochet off its hull, but it continues its advance, a solitary act of courage in a sea of collapse. But the British fire is too intense, too accurate. One shell strikes the tank, then another. The M1340 shudders, its tracks grinding to a halt. Smoke billows from its engine compartment. Around General Tolera, the other Italian tanks meet a similar fate. They are picked off one by one, their metal husks becoming monuments to a lost cause. The ground is churned by tank tracks and shell impacts. Italian infantry, caught in the open, fall under relentless machine gun fire. The dream of a breakthrough shatters into 1,000 pieces. The British line holds, unyielding. The battle for Beta Fam is effectively over. General Tolera, mortally wounded inside his disabled tank, is found by British soldiers. His final, heroic act of leadership ends not in victory, but in a dignified, if tragic, defeat. The sun climbs higher, casting long shadows over the wreckage. The desert, once a canvas for grand imperial ambitions, now bears witness to the complete and utter collapse of an army. The Battle of Beta Fam, culminating on February 7, 1941, delivered a crushing blow to Italian prestige and military capability in North Africa. The destruction of the Italian 10th Army was not merely a tactical victory for the British Commonwealth forces. It fundamentally altered the strategic landscape of the Western Desert Campaign. The British, under Lieutenant General Richard O'Connor, had advanced 800 kilometers in just 10 weeks, capturing 130,000 prisoners, 400 tanks, and 1,300 artillery pieces at a cost of only 494 killed and 1,373 wounded. This was a one-sided affair, a testament to British mobility, combined arms tactics, and superior leadership against an Italian force hampered by outdated doctrine, inadequate equipment, and severe logistical deficiencies. For General Mario Berti, the legacy of this defeat is complex. Although he was relieved of command in December 1940 due to illness, the army that met its fate at Beta Fam was, in many ways, the army he had led into Egypt. His initial strategic decisions, such as the establishment of non-mutually supporting strongpoints at Sidi Barrani, directly contributed to the ease with which the British broke through the Italian lines in the early stages of Operation Compass. The logistical challenges, the poor mechanization, and the outdated equipment that plagued the Italian 10th Army were issues that General Berti had confronted, and often highlighted, during his command. His pragmatism often clashed with Mussolini's unrealistic expectations, leading to a command structure that struggled to adapt to the realities of modern warfare. The annihilation of the 10th Army created a vacuum in North Africa that Benito Mussolini could not ignore. The Italian failures forced Adolf Hitler to intervene, sending German reinforcements to Libya. On February 11, 1941, just 4 days after the surrender at Beta Fam, the first elements of Major General Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps began landing at Tripoli. This marked a significant escalation of the North African campaign, transforming it from a largely Anglo-Italian conflict into a much larger, more protracted struggle involving German forces. The Italian defeats, ironically, paved the way for the arrival of one of the most celebrated commanders of the war, forever changing the course of the Desert War. General Berti retired after the armistice of September 8, 1943, and was later acquitted of war crimes, living out his days in his hometown of La Spezia, where he died in 1964. The man who initiated Italy's Grand Desert Adventure ultimately saw its catastrophic conclusion from afar, A testament to how leadership decisions, even those made months before, can reverberate with devastating consequences on the battlefield. An unexpected fact is that General Tolera, the Italian commander who died leading the final charge at Beta Fam, was buried with full military honors by the British Army in Benghazi, a rare gesture of respect between adversaries. If this story moved you, if you think these men deserve to be remembered, leave one word in the comments: legacy. Subscribe for a new forgotten story every week.